Hi, my name is Mark Biernot, and I'm a monetary economist. In this video, I want to talk about how will the geopolitical event in Russia end? To understand how it will end, you need to understand how it began. And in this video, I want to talk about indirectly economics, but more important, the geopolitical events, the genesis of how it began. And to do that, I'm going to first convey a story and then tell an outline of some historical events which are relevant to the current day situation. So let's go back into the Wayback Machine when I was young and beautiful and I was pumping iron at the gym. I was talking to a girl at the gym on a cordial basis. We weren't courting or anything. And I was talking to her specifically because she just came over from Belarus. And, you know, when you're from kind of this area, Eastern Europe, or your family's from there, you have a sense and you see other people and you can kind of tell that they're from this area. You almost have this sixth sense, this radar. And so we got engaged in conversation from time to time. When Putin got elected and became president, the first thing she said was, "This is a very, very bad thing." Remember, that was like 1999, that was 2000. That was a lifetime ago. She said it was a very, very bad thing. She knew it immediately. It's almost like women have this sixth sense. Have you ever heard of the hemline index? If you look at the hemline level or skirt level of women's dresses, they can kind of predict an upcoming recession. Today is probably not applicable because anything goes, but you understand what I mean. They just can sense things. And she kept on reiterating. And I was a little bit hesitant, and I said, well, you know, he looks good in the photo ops. And she said, no, it's a very, very bad situation. That was in the year 2000. And let's go back in time. When the Soviet Union came down, and there was Gorbachev, and the Soviet Union collapsed, and then there was Yeltsin, Boris Yeltsin. And, you know, he was kind of trying to be a reformer, and people were pretty happy. But he got involved in corruption, and not to mention the fact that he was on stage, you know, drinking potato water and grabbing women's pupas in public. He had to go. And there's a story of this transition, which I'm going to regress to first. When the Union came down and Yeltsin was in power, everybody joined hands, kumbaya, and they took down the statue of Felix Dzerzhinsky, the head of the secret police back in 1917, the Polish nobleman who set up the secret police for different reasons, because he kind of was burned by the Tsar. It's another story. And when they took the statue down, and I guess they maybe melted it and made children's toys out of it or whatever, and even the KGB was joining hands in circles with people, swaying back and forth, singing patriotic songs. And this was the end of tyranny, and symbolically the end of the secret police and the KGB. So explain to me how 8 years later, a lieutenant colonel in the KGB and head of the FSB, who became temporary prime minister and just assumed power during the resignation, he wasn't elected, became president. And then during his election, he was against like a straw man, some extreme communist old guard. So, of course, they're not going to get any votes. And he barely won the election as it was. So first he assumed power after Boris Yeltsin resigned, not by election, but just by being there. And then he had this election, which may not have even been an accurate election, and it definitely was a straw man election. He assumed power, and he's been in power ever since. You know, maybe in 2030 he'll run again. Of course, Medvedev, he took a temporary power, but he was just a puppet. So Yeltsin, what he started to do to validate his power was he started to, shake hands and photo ops with Bush, Obama, Clinton, Merkel, the French leader, the British leader, anybody who would be in front of him in front of a camera with big smiles and a polished suit, in contrast to Yeltsin, who was just basically a wild man on stage. It seemed to bring dignity to the office of presidency to Russia. And Americans, of course, bleary-eyed, Obama and Hillary Clinton, not saying anything against them, they were immediately hoping, among hopes, that this would bring democracy further into Russia. In the meantime, the reality was Putin was clamping down on liberties and just tightening the noose. Garry Kasparov immediately saw this happening and tried to alert the world. The wheels were set into motion in the year 2000 and before. Remember, he was the head of the FSB. A lot of people even forget about this. They call him a KGB lieutenant colonel, but he was the head of the FSB. How did that happen after that Kumbaya moment when they took down the statue of Felix Dzerzhinsky? That's the question, and the answer is it was planned all along. He was all along in the plan. Putin, he is simply a man who took opportunity, and he's going to bring back the glory of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union 2.0, only this time he said to himself he's not going to make mistakes. So what he did is he established relationships with Western powers, and we drank and gobbled up that Russian oil, and the West thought, and it is true, if you have free trade and good relations economically, this will accelerate democracy and freedom. And that was the great hope. I can excuse Obama and Clinton for not knowing because they didn't live under that. But Merkel, she lived under that. She should know better. But she was just addicted to that Russian oil. She just couldn't, she was gloated as they were gulping it down. And maybe she knew on one level, but maybe she didn't. It's hard to say. We can't judge history. But there came to a point of no return. The pipelines and the pacts were sealed. Putin's power was validated by the handshakes and the smiles with Western leaders in the eyes of his own people. This was his consolidation of power. He was a very patient person, but his goal, have no illusions. Even I was skeptical, and maybe if I even said it. His goal is to take Ukraine, Belarus, the Balkans, and perhaps Poland. This is the goal of Putin, because that was the Soviet Union. He's going to use Hungary as a puppet, Slovakia. He's going to bring back these old Warsaw Pact ideas through spreading popularism. Now, there's currently some resistance against this mounting in Europe, but he's a planned guy. He knows what he's doing in this regard. He's Machiavellian, making alliances with China, whoever he can. So how is this going to end? You saw how it began. He's been planning it. It's on a continuous path. The fate is sealed. There's no going back since 2000, the year 2000, or even before, because of the way he thinks Machiavellian style. And Marcus Aurelius said, if you want to understand something, ask yourself, what is its nature? If I pick up a crocodile or a gator back here, it's not going to start saying meow or barking, or a water moccasin. It's not going to be swimming, sailing, flying like a bird, because that's not its nature. The nature of Putin is an imperialist expansion. He is not going to change. When they asked Lavrov if Russia was going to surrender, he giggled, he smirked, he laughed and said no. Putin will not surrender, ever. So this will end in the way it began. It will begin and end in Moscow. And not necessarily on the front lines, but in Moscow. How this will unfold probably will be economic collapse. The Soviet Union could not compete with the American Ronald Reagan, buildup. And in this case, as much as the Russians like to bluff, because that is their whole game, they bluff. And, Dostoevsky, why not lie, cheat, and steal to your own advantage? They took it right from that playbook in a negative sense, a philosophical sense. They are being hollowed out. They are gradually being hollowed out. And the pressure is building. And with time, this will end like it began. The question is, how and to what extent will Russia be reformatted to make the world a better place, to make this a better future for all of us, so our children and our future generations don't have to worry about tyranny and despotism trying to expand, because we want, as as wrong as sometimes democracy seems, we want transparent democracy and freedom. And so do the people of Russia. So do all the people of the world. So that's your answer based on how it began. That's how it's going to end. In Moscow with Putin in the end. My name is Mark Biernot, and I'm an economist. Have a great day. Thank you very much.